Good morning and welcome to our webinar there on making accounts payable fast and flexible. We're delighted to be able to continue our series there with our partners on finding out what is out there exciting that we can add to Sage 50. A little bit of housekeeping just to begin with. You are muted, but there is a chat box there available, which we will be taking questions at the end there. And we will try and keep tight on time because we understand everybody is busy. So if we don't get around to any of your questions, bear with us and we will follow up afterwards. So as you know, Sage are always looking out for these exciting new features and functionality that we can bring to our customers. And today, I suppose, is no difference. So what we're going to look at is this accounts payable. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Adrian, the owner of InShip. And I'll just give a brief introduction there to Adrian. He is a qualified accountant, and for his sins, he has spent most of his career working with Irish multinationals, but his speciality was working in loss-making and underperforming companies. His job was to access a business viability, create an action plan, and implement that plan. Now, that is a difficult undertaking in the best of times, and credit to him. But I also do know that if he didn't have that technology off the shelf, that wouldn't deter him, and he would certainly find a way to get it developed, which I think is where we might find ourselves here today, Adrian.
Correct, yeah. So,
I suppose, where did the idea initially kick off from, if we start with that?
I start off with that. That's an embarrassing question in some respect, because it started off a long time ago. 30 years ago, I was working in a company in the UK that sold paper bags, believe it or not, to Tesco's. And when we delivered anything to Tesco's, we had to enter our invoice onto Tesco's system. And at the same time, my dad owned a small sort of Spar type shop. And he was at home at night with a big, one of those big Collins's book, writing up his invoices on that. And I was sort of saying, God, big business versus small business, there must be a better way of doing that. And I'm quick to action. So about 25, 30 years later, I basically started the process of coming up with InShip.
Right. Okay. Well, that certainly was a brave move. So you were looking at a quick data tool, but I suppose, InShip must be more than that.
It is more than that. Like the quick data tool of grabbing the information off the invoice is really only one process within actually processing an invoice. It's the last process. And a lot of people think it's all it is, but when you actually break down when an invoice is generated and it arrives in your company from when you're sorted, you match it to something else, you give one or two people get one or two people to approve it, then your data enter that. The system basically verifies what your data entry, you reconcile it and you file it. There's a lot of steps. There's about 9 or 10 steps in that. And just a quick data extraction tool doesn't cover that. So what we did with InShip is we basically turned those 10 complex steps into a setup process that gets done once. And then after that, you have an automated process that really grabs the invoice from an email and sends it to approval and then uploads it to the accounts package, making it much easier, but basically customizing how that goes, whether it's matched to a PO or whether it's not. That's really sort of what InShip is all about. It's not just grabbing some simple information off an invoice.
So how does the process work there when you're talking about? Continue that.
To start off the process, what you would do is you would get your supplier to email their invoices to either an InShip email address or say invoices at your business, say invoices at Pimbrook, and that automatically forwards the invoices into InShip. So you don't get involved at this stage. Then after that, what actually happens is InShip reads that invoice 5 times. If it's seen that invoice before or it's seen an invoice from that supplier before, it knows what to do. It follows the rules for that supplier and then basically pushes it through to do that. But if it hasn't seen the invoice before, basically it goes to a new document. You set that supplier up, and then from then on, those invoices flow naturally through the system.
Okay, and if I can I follow on again from there, if you don't mind, just setting up a supplier?
Set up a supplier, like what we've tried to do here is make this as easy as possible. And it's all about really drawing boxes. What happens first when the system sees an invoice, it actually has a brain, it reads the invoice. In this case here, it would have grabbed the invoice number that you can see up here, the date, the purchase order numbers, the totals, the VAT, etc., etc. Your job is to review that it's actually done that, and you can then start to add some tricks in it. In this case here, we're basically highlighting the delivery address, so we can actually code that invoice or route that invoice for somebody to approve based on where that product's being delivered. Now that can be a tail number for an aircraft, for example. It could be a vehicle number. It could be a project number. Loads of different things you can decide on how you want to basically route an invoice. Also, we're grabbing the line items of an invoice, and we're doing that because you might want to do special nominal coding based on a line item, or you might you might want to basically help match that line item up with what you've ordered. And as well as that, what we do is, and I'll show you this in a few minutes, we actually watch out for price increases on that particular line item. So like what the setting up is drawing boxes. It's very simple. Then after that, you say how you want that invoice to flow.
Okay, now unfortunately we don't all live in the perfect world. So without putting you on the spot there, what happens if we do have an issue with an invoice?
I think so, yes, well, we would have done a lot of this at the early days in InShip, and we would have had to deal with an awful lot of actually very weirdly constructed PDF files, but I won't go into that side of the process. But really, within InShip, so just to give you a couple of examples, if an invoice comes in and it's an old date, it goes to a special section in the system where the admin person says, yeah, no, that's an old invoice, it shouldn't have come in, or it's okay to go through. If a duplicate invoice comes in, immediately it's taken out of the system and put into a special area for basically somebody to actually review and make sure that you don't process it. Like, so a lot of times it's wasting the time of processing a duplicate invoice, not paying it. It costed money to basically work out, hey, I've already got this invoice before. So InShip basically grabs it right at the start for and when that happens.
No, that's a fair point. We do, certainly with a cash flow issue and things like that, we don't want to be paying duplicate invoices and then discover it later, all right?
Yeah.
I suppose if we come down to the side of the process where it comes to approving on that side of things.
Yeah, that's really where you do your work, or you do very little work, but that's where the work is actually done. So if I just go into the approval process, what we're doing here is we've displayed actually the invoice. So behind all the data, we have the invoice. We've automatically coded this is a nominal ledger invoice. We've automatically coded the line items. We're basically coding the invoice based on where it got delivered from. That could have been set up by a supplier. We're watching out for price increases. So like in reality, and you can also drill down and actually see when you've purchased those items before. Remember, this is not a PO, this is just a general invoice. So like what we're doing here is we are giving you a huge amount of information with an invoice. And all we're trying to do is we're trying to persuade you to say, if you're happy with that, tick, and that processes the invoice. You have nothing else to do. If you're happy with that invoice, tick. So you can actually get this done. It doesn't have to be done by somebody in the accounts department. It actually can be done by somebody outside the accounts department. If you have a problem with the invoice, you can reject it. You can put it on hold. And the hold can be a private hold that you just do for yourself, or you can send the invoice back to the supplier with a reason that it's on hold. Or if it's a strange invoice, you can basically transport it or send it off to somebody else in the accounts. The one I always give as an example is this person who looks after stationery, might be in the accounts department, and an invoice comes in with a load of, say, marketing pens, something like that you might order, Stephanie, and it's not up to them to approve it. So they basically forward that invoice for you to approve because it's outside their regime. And the approval process as well can be set up and to have a particular workflow. It be set up that if somebody has only certain limits to actually approve an invoice, etc., etc. So that's actually approving a PO invoice, a non-PO invoice. When you're approving a PO invoice, what we've done here is we've basically, again, we have the invoice behind what we're displaying, but on the right-hand side here, we're displaying what the purchase order was and what was received against that purchase order. And if that matches what the invoice is, it's marked green, and you can actually approve that invoice straight away without actually having to go back into any paperwork. At the same time, You can add comments to that invoice if you want to add comments to the invoice. We still have price detection on it. And it just on this particular invoice, it's quite nice to see. It's one of those invoices, loads of different lines on it. And with one click with InShip, you can actually clean up that invoice. So what we're doing again is we're displaying the information that you need to display on the screen straight away. You haven't done anything, it's right there. And we're also giving you links to information that you might need. And if you just look at the items up at the top, this purchase order was received under 3 GRNs, and we're actually giving you links to the other GRNs on the screen as well. So we're giving you huge amounts of information to make the process of actually approving that invoice really, really simple.
Okay, excellent. That's absolutely relevant. But what happens after that piece?
What happens after that piece? So what we've thought about this, and some people sort of say, well, why doesn't it just upload to the accounts packet at that stage? And we sort of say, no. What we like to do is we put the invoices to basically what we call our upload section, and that gives the people in the accounts their final view of the situation, to actually look at the invoices, see what they're uploading, make sure that there's no global problems, and then push the invoices up. So after they've gone out, they've been approved by you or whoever within the organization, they end up in the uploads folder, and you can basically push them to the accounts package. And the upload folder has a lot of questions that we can add to it. We only add the questions you want, but like a good example of a question would be you might only want to upload invoices before certain dates. So say at the moment, say today was the 5th of September, you won't want to upload your September invoices, you'll only want to upload August and before. You can actually have a switch to only allow basically invoices before the 1st of September to be uploaded, to make sure that you're not uploading future months invoices, but you're not stopping the process flow at the same time. So it's just a very simple process to upload them.
Ah, right. Okay, that is good. Certainly for accounts people signing off the month end. Can I ask you just to qualify there? What outside of invoices do you handle? Is there other documents there that we can get?
Well, the first one, obviously, it's just straight away is obviously credit notes. Like it's credit notes, the opposite of invoices. Someone sends you a credit note. Obviously, we can handle credit notes. We also can handle backup documents, both ad hoc and formulated backup documents. So, like if somebody, just a very simple example, if you have somebody who does a fire inspection in the premises, and you get an invoice that normally basically comes with a fire inspection report, you can save the fire inspection report within InShip that's linked to the invoice, or you can do the same with proof of delivery process. But probably the most exciting thing that you can have on top of an invoice is a statement. And with the statement, we basically grab the line items off the statement, i.e. the date, the invoice number, and the value, and we reconcile that against what we've received within InShip, giving you links back and forth between the two of them. That means that like your statement reconciliation process is really a lot faster and a lot wider, because at the moment in time, if you're reconciling a statement, you'll be sitting down with stage open on one side, a piece of paper on the other side, and you say, yeah, I have these invoices, these 5 invoices are missing. Within InShip, you know that if they're in the organization, or if you're missing them. And if you finish off doing your statement reconciliation and just click complete, what will actually happen there will we will actually send out a request to the supplier looking for any missing invoices. But like, so to probably be a little story to give you, just to give you, it sort of gives you an idea of the overall power of InShip. The first time, and it's lovely when something like this happens really early on, and you can't ask for better when it happens the first time you use something. The first time with a beta customer that we beta tested the statement reconciliation, I went into a boardroom, and there's about 10 people in the boardroom, and I asked the question, what statement did they want to reconcile? And they gave me a statement, and the statement they gave me was a nice simple one, 17 pages long, with whatever 50, 60 transactions per page. So you're talking about a couple of 100 transactions. I hit reconciliation, and then sort of crossed the fingers and hoped that everything held together. The system came back, found all the invoices, told them basically which had been uploaded to their accounts packages, which they were still waiting approval for in the organization. And I turned to the guy who normally did the statement reconciliation. I said, how long would that normally take you to do it? And he said, yesterday I did that, and it took me the morning to do it. So half a day's work down to 1 or 2 minutes. But what was really powerful was what his colleague said to him. He said, it normally would take you much longer to do that because you've been missing 30 to 40 invoices. And you'd have to send off to the supplier to resupply and send in those 30 to 40 invoices, which in fact he actually had, but they were basically in the process for approval. And this shows you the power of InShip. In one day, all your documents are in, they're all in control, you know where they are, and you're not wasting time looking for copies.
Yeah, actually, I mean, that speaks volumes there, really, to be fair, Adrian, because I think that side of the business does take an inordinate amount of time. And the second thing is, what you are doing for your supplier is making it an awful lot easier for them to send in the information, so that the total process end to end between you and the supplier is better.
Yeah.
By the sounds of things there, certainly. And I do like that backup document, ideally, because that is where somebody in the office files one thing in one place and then somebody files them, or they're keeping them up. If they're PDFs, they're filing them locally or one thing. So that's vital, really.
Yeah.
Now I suppose it comes down to, but I want to find some invoices again. How easy is that if I look back in it?
Well, hopefully, so at the moment, hopefully you're not using a big lever arch file to actually find invoices. What we have in InShip is we've built a search engine, and we've built a very powerful search engine. You can see here you've got 20 different questions that you can combine to actually find an invoice. This is a straightforward one. This is the lazy one. This is the one that everyone uses all the time. I'm looking for an invoice from a particular supplier. I pick its name, I hit search, I go to the month I think it's from, and I actually find it. But what like the power of this search thing is, for example, you can actually search for a line item. So remember we highlighted those line items earlier on, and we watched out for price increases. You can do a search here and search for basically every time you purchase something. And again, an example from a customer we were talking to once, and it was me trying to explain the power of the search, and I couldn't think of anything, and I was in a restaurant. There were a group of restaurants, and I sort of said, you might be looking for an odd bottle of wine that you don't like, an expensive bottle of wine you can't remember who supplied it. And they said, oh, we spent so much time doing that. So they just type in the name of the bottle of wine, and it will actually call up every single invoice that it's on. And it saves them a huge amount of time actually trying to find actually where those weird, unusual bottles of wines that we probably pay far too much money for when we're in a restaurant, but they do add so much to the occasion. So that's where it is. Instead of trying to actually find that, it's very simple. And another example I've given is somebody came looking for an electricity bill, and they looked at it and said, that seems a bit high. I want to see every electricity bill for the last 6 months. If you do that at this moment in time, you go to your accounts package, you take down the ref file reference number that you have to get, you go to 6, 8, 10, 12 lever arch files, you pull them out, you get the electricity bill, you bring it to the photocopier, you basically photocopy it, you put the photocopy, or you give the photocopy to the person who's looking for the document to that person, so you make sure you don't lose it. And like sort of half your day is gone. With InShip, you type in whoever your ESB supplier or whoever your electricity supplier is, you'll get the results straight in front of them. In fact, you show the manager how to do it. The question doesn't even get asked.
That's reasonable. I'm glad that you posed that as a rhetorical question about my lever arch filing there. I'm a bit like the builder's house falling down. I'm finding all these exciting things for other people, but I certainly will make sure we push on ourselves. Before I open up to the audience there for some questions, I suppose my first one is, and I think it could be on everybody's tongue, and I think it's something that we're all conscious of, is onboarding. You know, yeah. It's great having all of these things, but I mean, we are very, I have to speak to myself, I was the slowest person to go on to Ross. So, you know, onboarding has to be a critical part for our clients, so that we can, you know, we can get them up and running to gain all of these benefits.
I understand the question, and I like your confession about being so slow to go on to Ross. But what we sort of recognize that, and like, so we recognize that quite early on, because people have a number of times that they consider putting on InShip into a place, and it's always the offices that want it the most are the ones that are the busiest, and then they sort of say, I don't have time to do it. So we try and take as much of the energy out of the process as possible. So what we would do is, just say if you were saying, hey Adrian, I want to put Pimbrook into this particular business, or sorry, Pimbrook InShip into this particular business, how do we do it? I sort of say, well, we're not going to try and get it in for the 1st of September. We're going to go in to get it for the 1st of October. So in September, what we do is we set up the accounts, we do some very basic training, but the most important thing is we get you to send in the current invoices that you're getting emailed by the supplier, and we push them into InShip as test invoices, but we're also basically setting up the templates and setting up the process so that you can actually, when you go live in the 1st of October, you're actually 100% ready. So the actual setting of the templates is done, your training is done. And the one thing that this pandemic has done, has helped us with, is actually it's really streamlined down our training. And what we do is we do online training, but the online training is now much quicker, it's much smoother, it's much faster. It's not a half a day that's going to take a half a day out of somebody's life in the office. We break it under a number of different sections. As this webinar is being recorded, we record all our training sessions, so you can actually take away the training sessions. But the key takeaway is we're doing the templates for you for the first couple of months. We're actually setting them up and doing the heavy lifting on that. So a lot of the times you're just actually going in and actually doing that quick tick at the top of the screen to approve an invoice, and pushing the uploads up, so you can actually be up and going in less time than it would normally take you to process those invoices.
That's music to my ears anyway, to kick it off with. Right, I'm just going to have a look at the chat there, see if anything has come in. Okay, one there. Any security issues? That's an interesting one.
And actually, your security issues is actually sort of increased with InShip. What actually happens on your security point of view is all your communication, obviously, between InShip and yourself is basically encrypted. All documents are stored under encrypted names. So we wouldn't, if we were storing a document from Pimbrook, it doesn't say it's Pimbrook, it's basically given a long string of characters. So the site is 100% secure, all our backup side of the system is secure, and we only work with the likes of Google, Microsoft and DigitalOcean. And as you know, Stephanie, they're the big providers of cloud services. We're not using Joe down the road or anything like that. We're only using the best cloud providers there are.
Okay, no, that's reasonable enough. We've just got one coming in there. How does InShip support remote working there? I think you might have alluded to it a bit there, but if you can elaborate maybe a little bit.
Like in reality, like at the moment, a lot of remote working is going on, and what basically InShip allows you to do is, it actually, like, if you're looking for someone to approve an invoice, what are you doing at the moment? Are you emailing them a copy of that invoice? Are you basically waiting for him to come into the office to sign those invoices, and hopefully the day or two that he's spending in the office, the person will actually sign those invoices? With InShip, you're actually sending the invoices to their PC. You're monitoring whether they've actually approved them or not, and you're allowing yourself, you're allowing them the ability to access the information at any moment in time, rather than when they have to come into the office. Or like sort of like with one new client who actually we took on through the pandemic, and saying this is going to, because they've just gone live, this is going to save them a huge amount of time, because there's bundles of invoices spread all over the place, with people actually approving from home or work or whatever, and they're trying to actually get them back to one location is hard. And this is why sort of large organizations have in the past have used InShip, because they have people all over the place. But smaller organizations are now seeing the benefit of this, because they're a little bit more all over the place because of basically the remote working.
That's a fair point, yeah. Any issue around revenue compliance?
No, we basically store the invoices for 7 years. 6 years is what the revenue we're looking for. The method of storage is well within revenue guidelines, and in reality, revenue likes systems like this, because systems like this are routine generating, are routine setup. So basically a process is followed all the time. That's what they like. You'll actually see that when they come out and they actually do it, hopefully they won't do an audit on anyone, but if they do an audit, there's less of an audit done, because they audit the process, they see the process is fine, they check a very small number of invoices, because they see a process is followed through all these things.
Yeah, that's true, of course, yeah. Oh, and a good one here there. Just, is there any user limits or levels?
Well, like sort of in relation to users, apart from the smallest of packages that we sell, apart from that, basically we give undefined number of users can use the system. We encourage as many people to use it as possible. And some people do use InShip because they don't want to buy 50 licenses for their software, because they want them just to approve invoices. So like, we don't limit the number of users that are using InShip. If that's the question, just in case there's a slight difference questions on it, a user, like, you can limit the access the user can have. We have a number of different user levels, but just give you the sort of the two extremes. You have admin who can see everything, change everything, and you've got what we call an approver, who is a person who can only see the invoices that you've sent for them to approve. So if, for example, your job is to approve software invoices, but we set you up now, you can only see invoices from this moment in time that we say that you have to approve. If we stop you approving those software invoices, you will only ever see the ones that you did approve. So you're locked into basically seeing only what you saw. So you've got a very tight controlled on one side and a very wide open on the other side, and there's pieces in between.
Okay, right. So there's no user limit, but you do have controls and permissions on those users.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious of time there. Adrian, I really appreciate you coming on board there. And if there's a few more questions there, we'll get back to people directly. There's some more maybe in-depth ones there we can take offline.
Yeah, but, I can see one there, pro forma invoices, which is easy answered, but we'll take it offline, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much. And to the audience there, thank you very much for joining us today.